Have you ever opened an IBM Operational Decision Manager project and just stared at all the different files, wondering what on earth they all do? Yeah, you're definitely not alone. In this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the anatomy of an ODM rule project, one essential file at a time, so you know exactly what each one is for and why it's so important. So, here's our game plan. We'll start with a quick look at the overall project anatomy. Then, we're going to dive deep into the real workhorses, the BOM file, that's our business blueprint, then the BOM to XOM mapping, which is the bridge to our code, and the vocabulary files that make it all speak plain English. And to wrap up, we'll see how it all clicks together to make a real working project. All right, first up, a rule project's anatomy. The main thing to get your head around is that an ODM project isn't just one single thing. It's really more like an ecosystem, a whole collection of different files, and every single one has a very specific job to do. Getting a handle on these components is kind of the first step to mastering ODM. You know, a really good way to think about it is like building a house. You wouldn't just have one giant document for everything, right? Of course not. You'd have your main blueprints for the design, a separate plan for the electrical, another for the plumbing. Well, an ODM project is structured in exactly the same way. This separation is totally intentional, and honestly, it's what makes the whole system so incredibly powerful. Okay, so let's start with the absolute foundation of any ODM project, the business object model, or what we call the BOM file. This thing is the project's core blueprint. The BOM file is where you define all of your business concepts. It's the place where you spell out terms like customer, account, or loan application. You're defining what these things are and what properties they have. And what's absolutely crucial here is that this is all done completely separate from any of the underlying technical code. And hey, if you've ever seen even a little bit of Java, this format is probably going to look super familiar. It's designed that way on purpose, to look a lot like a standard class definition. It gives you a really simple text-based way to map out your business objects, their attributes, and their methods. Okay, so we've got our business blueprint all laid out. But how does this business-friendly definition actually connect to the real executable code? Well, that is where our next file comes in, and it acts as this absolutely critical bridge between those two different worlds. And that bridge is the BOM to XOM mapping file, which you'll see with a .b2x extension. Now, the XOM, the execution object model, that's just the actual code, the real Java classes that your rules are going to run against. The B2X file is a simple XML file, and its entire job is to map the business terms from your BOM to those code objects. If the BOM is the what, the B2X is the how. It connects the business world to the tech world. And here's what that bridge looks like in action. As you can see, it's just a straightforward XML file with really clear tags. The business name tag points right back to the term we defined in our BOM file, and the execution name tag points to the actual Java class in the XOM. This explicit mapping is the secret sauce that makes the whole system work. So just to nail this down, because it's super important, the .BOM file is the what. It's where you define your business concepts. The .b2x file is the how. It's what maps those concepts to the code that's actually going to do the work. Two different jobs, two different file formats, but they work together perfectly. All right, so we've defined our business terms and we've connected them to the code. But there's still a piece missing. I mean, to make rules that are truly easy for business folks to write, we need to translate our more technical terms into natural, human-readable language. And that, my friends, is the job of the vocabulary file, or the .voc file. It's basically a simple key-value file that gives you the natural language version, the verbalization, for everything in your BOM. And you might notice that locale part in the file name. That's a huge deal. It means you can have different vocabulary files for different languages, say one for English, one for French, and one for Spanish. This is where the real magic happens. This vocabulary file turns something that looks like code into something that feels like a conversation. A technical term like myClass.attribute gets translated into a totally usable phrase like set the attribute of this to attribute. This is the engine that lets a business analyst write rules that read just like plain sentences instead of lines of code. Okay, we've got the core building blocks down. We've defined the concepts, we've bridged them to the code, and we've translated them into everyday language. Now, let's look at the files that manage the project as a whole, and, of course, the files that hold the actual rules themselves.
First up is the .rule project file. The best way to think of this is like the main project file you'd find in any other kind of development environment. It's an XML file that keeps track of all the settings, the paths to the BOM and exom, and the overall project structure. It's the master container that holds the whole shebang together.
And finally, we get to the actual rules. These all live in a bunch of different XML-based files. You've got .brl for your standard business rules, .dta for decision tables, .rfl for rule flows that manage the execution order, and a few others. And while they all have different extensions for different jobs, they all share that same underlying XML structure. So, you might be thinking, why? Why so many small text-based files? Well, a quote from the source material gives us the answer plain and simple. The structure of the files has been designed to be handled easily by diff tools. And diff tools are what developers use all the time to compare different versions of a file.
And that right there is the ultimate payoff. That's the big so what. Because every single file is text-based and has one specific isolated job, it becomes incredibly easy to use version control systems like Git. Teams can see exactly who changed what and when, they can merge changes without creating a huge mess, and it makes true collaboration between business analysts and IT developers not just possible, but seamless.
So that brings us to the complete workflow. You start by defining what your business is all about in the BOM. Then you connect how it's actually going to run with that B to X mapping file. Next, you translate it into natural language with the VOC file. And finally, you organize the entire thing with the .rule project file, creating the perfect framework for all your rules to live in. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Now that you can see all the different pieces and how they fit together, how does this intentional separation, this wall between the business logic and the execution code, ultimately help teams build systems that are not just more agile today, but also way easier to maintain and change for years to come?